This is Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists. Welcome to Chasing the Horizon, brought to you by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. The podcast is now in iTunes, and you can always listen and learn more about it by going to our website at bmwmoa.org/podcast. My name is Wes Fleming. Thanks for joining us, and we'll get started right away with the news. Regular listeners will recall that I'm kind of obsessed with India lately. India is not one of the places that tops my personal bucket list of destinations, but I believe we can learn a lot about the future of the motorcycle industry by paying attention to what its 1.3 billion people are buying and building when it comes to motorcycles. Both BMW and Triumph have motorcycles built there to get around India's excessive import taxes, and an Indian company called Hero Motocorp bought half of Eric Buell Racing before stripping it of nearly all its useful technology and ideas, then pulling their stake and going home. Not to mention that two Indian companies, Royal Enfield and Bajaj, which is Triumph's manufacturing partner there, were making serious bids to buy Ducati not long ago when Volkswagen was actively shopping for a buyer. I've talked about Royal Enfield a few times on the show, and I'm working on getting their American CEO, a guy called Rod Copes, on the show. In the meantime, I think it's worth paying attention to how Royal Enfield makes its play to boost its U.S. sales numbers. Royal Enfield is going global, and it looks like they think having a good presence in the United States is an important step towards that goal. They're building their dealer network, they're improving their technology, they're boosting the size of their bikes, and they've even announced that they'll be bringing their single-cylinder adventure bike called the Himalayan to the U.S. in 2018. Royal Enfield has 3 factories in India that are capable of producing a combined total of over 800,000 motorcycles a year. That's more motorcycles than are sold in the U.S., not just by one manufacturer, but by all manufacturers, and by a wide margin to boot. You can expect to hear more about India's place in the motorcycle industry on the show and in the news, and I'll certainly keep you posted about Royal Enfield's moves as they work on penetrating the American market. Kawasaki unveiled their new U.S. spec bikes at the Progressive International Motorcycle Show in New York City earlier in December. The new bikes headed for the U.S. include the Baby Ninja, a 400cc sport bike that's been completely redesigned for the 2018 model year. Expected to sell for about $5,500 with ABS. Oh, and Kawasaki says that it weighs less than the 250R that they stopped making back in 2012. They also announced the addition of the ZX-10R SE to their line of superbikes. The SE has a slick new electronically adjustable suspension and will cost about $22,000. Along with that comes the Ninja H2 SX and SE models. You can expect those bikes to cost about $19,000 and $22,000 respectively. They're both based on the H2 Hyperbike that came out in 2015, but they also both feature a brand new supercharger designed for that extra oomph. Rounding out the offerings is the Kawasaki that I'm most excited about, the Z900 RS and its sister bike, the RS Cafe. These are cool-looking, retro-styled bikes that clearly call back to the heady days of the 1970s and early 80s when the UJM ruled the roads. If you've never heard the term UJM, it stands for Universal Japanese Motorcycle. These were bikes that were everywhere, anywhere between 2 and 4 cylinders, and they were just really simple bikes that anybody could pick up and ride just about. My experience with the UJM centered around Honda's CB750, and it was a bike that was easy to ride, easy to take care of, easy to work on, and it could take a beating on just about any kind of ride you could possibly imagine. The 900 RS is an updated version of the Z1 from the early 70s, and I have to say it's a really beautiful looking retro bike. You'll be able to pick one up for about $11,000 when they hit showrooms. Honda announced that P.J. Jacobsen will join their World Superbike team for the 2018 season. Jacobsen will replace Nicky Hayden, who died in the middle of the 2017 season when he was hit by a car during a training ride on his bicycle. I think Honda is honoring Hayden's memory by putting another American on the team, but it's not just about honor. Of course, it's all about winning races. Jacobsen raced for MV Agusta last year and showed well, but he suffered from numerous breakdowns that kept him from running at the front of the pack in World SSP. He's raced superbikes before in the British circuits and said, quote, "I don't have any expectations. There's going to be a lot of learning for me to do next year. I don't really have too much pressure on myself and will ride the best that I can. We look forward to a great showing in 2018 from PJ Jacobson. I want to wrap up the news here with two things. First is to thank Cycle News, as always, for their ongoing support for the podcast. Be sure to check out their free weekly magazine by visiting their website at cyclenews.com and tell them you heard about it on Chasing the Horizon. The second thing is to remind you that life is short and you never know when it could end. I lost a friend this past week. He died unexpectedly at just 48 years old. David is the guy that I got my KTM 990 from, and his death has made me aware of my own mortality all over again. I just wanted to tell all of you to pay attention to your everyday health. Take care of yourselves so that you can be around for your friends and family for as long as possible. David had hip troubles in the last several years, which is how I ended up with the KTM, but he continued riding on a Can-Am Spyder because, like all of us, he loved motorcycling. He'll be missed by his friends and family, and I'll think about him every time I ride or work on the 990. I've been a fan of Giant Loop's motorcycle luggage for a while. I first met Harold Cecil at a BMW rally in Pennsylvania several years ago, and since then I've purchased and used a number of his soft luggage products. Most recently, I picked up a Kiger tank bag, and just a couple of weeks ago, I got a couple of his new Possibilities Possibles pouch, I think they're called. Small roll-top bags that are big enough to use as a toolkit or a first aid kit, or really just a way to organize stuff that you're tossing in your side cases. One of the great things about Giant Loop is they have bags both big and small, and all of it is rugged and road trip ready. Harold sat down with me at the MOA's big rally in Salt Lake City to talk about his company. So the interview portion of this episode's podcast, we're talking with Harold Cecil from Giant Loop, renowned for soft luggage and other products. And thanks for joining us, Harold. I appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me here. Yeah.
You are a longtime motorcycle rider. I know we talked about motorcycles quite a bit before, but tell me a little bit about your first motorcycling experiences.
Yeah. Well, I think I was just telling you the story the other day about how my first road bike, the first kind of street legal bike that I had, I literally traded a skateboard for it when I was in college.
Which is a fantastic way to get a motorcycle.
Yeah, and it was a basket case, and I hauled it back to the place I was living, and pumped the rainwater out of the cylinders, and put some new spark plugs in, and hot wires the thing, and got it running, and rode that thing for a while. And my wife of 26 years was riding around on the back of that thing all over Northern California, and so that was, I grew up on mini bikes and dirt bikes and stuff, and then that was kind of my first bike that enabled me to hit the road a little bit, such as it was.
Yeah.
But so that.
And, I'm kind of amazed at how many people I talk to who say that thing. I started on mini bikes and dirt bikes, and my motorcycling experience was completely different. My very first motorcycle was a CB750. Yeah. Road bike, and I never rode a dirt bike, never rode a mini bike, not an ATV or three-wheeler. I just jumped right into regular motorcycles, big motorcycles. Yeah. And kind of never looked back. So it always kind of amuses me that so many people had a very similar experience that is also completely different from mine.
Yeah.
And that kind of plays a lot because motorcycling has different segments, and the return rider or the first time rider, we see a lot of people, getting on big bikes for the very first time. Yeah. But, the people that seem to have been in it for the longest have a story similar to yours. I had a mini bike. Old people older than us will, took a lawnmower engine and converted it to a motorcycle, that kind of thing. But, so I imagine that because of your segment of the industry, luggage and things like that, you probably have a wide choice of motorcycles from recent or current models. What are you riding now?
Well, I've we bought a brand new F800 GS in 2010 when the rally was coming to the Redmond, the Deschutes County Fairgrounds. And so
just down the road from you, right?
Yeah, right down the road from us. And we were just getting Giant Loop started at that point in time. And it had always been sort of an aspiration of mine to own a BMW, honestly. And
nice.
When that F800 first came out, I thought, wow, that's really cool. And, the non-boxer motor, and it just looked a little different. And so I rode the wheels off that thing for 7 years and just recently sold it. And I always have a dirt bike, like a full dirt bike though, around as well, because for me that F800 was the first time I'd owned a twin cylinder adventure bike. And initially the challenge was just, okay, what do I do with this beast off road? And I had the good fortune of riding really early on with some really skilled, experienced friends who gave me a bunch of tips about how to manage the bigger bikes off road and stuff. And they're not dirt bikes at the end of the day. So I always have kind of one of each, ideally.
It's kind of funny to me a little bit to hear you talk about the F800 as a big bike. My main bike is an R1200 GS, so to me the F800 is a little bike. That's the thing I think of. Well, if I'm going to do some off-road practice, I want to use a lighter bike, so I'm going to track down an F800.
Not that much lighter than a 1200 GS,
which I've come to understand. But the people that I know that have both or ride both extensively say that the F800 is a really nimble bike because it's a lot narrower, and so it seems to be a little easier to push around when the terrain gets rough. Not that the R1200 is all that terribly difficult.
No, in fact, I think in a lot of respects, the 1200, the weight is positioned in such a way that it actually feels a little lighter and nimbler, in fact. So, fantastic machines, right? That you can take a 500 plus pound machine off road at all is something of an engineering feat.
It sure is. Yeah, and they have, the F800 had a bigger front wheel.
The 21 inch.
The 1200. And coming from a dirt bike background, you probably have a lot more experience with 19 and 21 inch front wheels.
Sure.
So I can see why you were attracted to the F800. Now I was kind of leading you with that last question because I know that you just got a KTM 1090, which is a brand new model out on the market. As good as the F800 is, what attracted you to the 1090?
Well, I was considering a few different bikes for Giant Loop. For us, part of it is that it's always helpful to have kind of a new bike that people are interested in and that sort of thing. And so there were a few on my list for consideration. And the more I heard about and the more I read about that 1090, the more it just seemed like it was really a well set up off-road twin cylinder adventure bike.
And since your background is largely off-road, that seems like a pretty good natural attraction.
So that was the attraction really when I heard Quinn Cody talking about some of the suspension work and some of that was the deciding factor for me.
And from everything that I've heard, that 1090 is just a spectacular bike.
So far so good. I have 800 miles on it and it's just been grins the whole time
yet. So on the 1090 that you ride, when you ride, I know you have just gotten it, but what from your own line do you put on it for your purposes when you're riding around?
Well, one of the things that we've been trying to do in terms of expanding our line and filling in options for riders in the last couple of years is we've been focusing on adding some rack-mounted, pannier options. We really started the company partly with the objective of eliminating the need for racks on motorcycles. So those horseshoe-shaped designs that we really pioneered when we started the company in 2008 with that first design that literally bolted onto the plastics of the dirt bike. Those bags have been refined and developed to the point that we did a complete redesign of the Coyote and Great Basin for this season and made them roll tops and made a few other really nice updates. But we've been trying to offer riders that are warming up to the idea now that like hard panniers certainly have their advantages. They're really convenient. They're great for road riding. They're great for commuting. You can get in and out of them quickly. You can lock them to the bike. So I fully understand and appreciate that there's a value and a place for that option. And then, but I think we've done a pretty good job in the last almost 10 years now of convincing people that, especially for off-road, that lightening things up and going with a soft option has a number of advantages. And so now we have some panniers that you don't have to remove your racks. You can swap back and forth between your hard luggage and the soft luggage options. So on this bike, one of the first things I did actually was put luggage racks on it so that we could use some of these new panniers. So I think we're into season 2 now with our big round the world panniers, which were specifically designed to be rack mounted with hardware and to be a true apples to apples alternative to hard luggage in terms of the amount of gear you can carry, etc.
And then you throw a shoulder strap on it and you can walk away.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this season we introduced what we call the Mototrek panniers, a project that we collaborated with our distributor in Australia.
2Ks, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's his name. He that's his brand name. But so we've been working with Steve Smith at Adventure Moto almost from the beginning of Giant Loop, and Australia's always been a really important market for us.
Nice.
So for the last couple of years, we were collaborating with him on the design of these new RF welded rack-mounted panniers with an integrated mounting system that doesn't require any hardware. And so we have 2 rack-mounted options now. So
large and small.
Yeah,
large and smaller.
Yeah.
I mean, the Mototrek, I've seen them. They're not tiny. You can still get a lot of gear in them, but they're not as big as the other ones.
Well, they are pretty minimalist, and that is in keeping with our sort of philosophy of packing, is to keep it light and minimal, and we just think it's more fun to ride the bikes when they're less encumbered with gear.
Yeah. So you mentioned RF welding, which I know is a technology that gets used a lot in soft luggage and waterproof bags. But I don't actually know anything about how does that work. I mean, what is RF welding?
Well, so sewing is very much a handcraft. It's still very much a human being running fabrics through a machine to connect them together, basically. And the only way that you can really make a sewn seam waterproof is to seam seal it by adding a tape backing to it.
And another step in the process, another employee, and
it's super labor intensive, and some of the complex shapes of our designs don't really lend themselves to, after the bag is sewn together, then running it through a machine again to seal the seams. So the best option becomes radio frequency welding. So that bonds the fabrics together with no needle holes through the fabrics. So you get a true 100% waterproof seam. So all of our double-ended dry bags are RF welded, and we've been doing those for a few years. And then just in the last couple of years, we've achieved enough of a scale that we can now commit to doing some other products using that construction. So instead of a person running it through a machine by hand, dies get built, and the fabrics get sort of stamped together and then heated to make the bond.
Right. So is that with the RF, the radio frequency heats the fabric and kind of seals it together?
Yeah, that's why they call it welding.
Right.
And it's literally like bonding those materials together in much the same way that when you melt metal together to make a metal weld.
Yeah.
Right? So,
and I know how tough your stuff is because I have one of your tank bags that I use on my GS. I got it in KTM orange because I too have dreams of a KTM someday.
True confessions.
Yeah, exactly. And plus, orange is very visible.
Yeah,
my bike is blue and black and silver and gray, and it's not the brightest colored bike in the world. They made those what do they call it, Kalahari orange that was actually yellow. So having a piece of orange kit on top of my fuel tank, I think gives me a little bit of lateral visibility boost.
Yeah, good.
So I know how tough the stuff is, and I know how useful it is. If an RF seam ever came apart, can it be repaired? Can it be put back together?
Well, we have a lifetime warranty on our products
do.
against defects, and so typically, if something like a seam were to split or fail, we would just replace that product.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So when you get into that kind of product phase, I know one of the things that you guys have come out with recently is the gas bag, which is just a fantastic name because I don't think I've ever used the term gas bag in a positive connotation.
Well, I have to thank my friend Eric Lang at Ride Adventures for that. He and I were having beers one night and talking about that product, and he's the one who suggested gas bags. So thank you, Eric.
It's perfect. And of course, depending on what kind of traveling you're doing, you don't necessarily have to put gas in it. You could put water in it if you
Well,
need to.
no, it is fuel specific, so it's not a food grade product,
okay.
and that's really what makes it unique. I mean, it's truly the only product of its kind that's available in the United States.
Yeah. So very important. Don't put water you're going to drink in your gas bag.
Yeah, and then water and fuel don't really mix. So you don't. Yeah, so it is fuel specific.
So how did you come up with the idea for that?
Well, the concept's been around for a while. There's some kind of Chinese-made products, and that are imported to Australia, for example. Australia, they have huge distances where they don't have fuel available. So Australia, in particular, is carrying enough fuel is always a challenge. So the concept has been around for a while. We happen to have the good fortune of right up the road from us in Redmond, Oregon, one of the foremost experts in fuel containment, a company called Fuel Safe. Their manufacturing is right there, and so through the business community, I'd been friends with some of the folks there, and in particular this guy Bill Hare, who eventually became the company president. And I'd kind of been bugging him for a period of years, like, hey, I have this idea. I think that it's a really unique opportunity here. We would definitely need your help if we were ever to bring this to market. And so I sort of kept tapping him on the shoulder, for a period of 4 years, and then he became the president of the company and said, "Hey, let's do this thing."
Yeah.
And so him and this guy Mike Torvik that works there. Just rolled up their sleeves and went to work, and they invested an incredible amount of time and effort into R&D on this project, sourcing the exact right, materials and the filler neck material that would bond properly to the bladder itself.
Yeah, because you don't, especially when gas is involved, you don't want anything failing.
Yeah, absolutely. So they developed this completely unique set of materials and processes to build the inner liner bladder that contains the fuel, and then they've subjected that bladder to all the testing that they do for FAA certification for aviation fuel tanks and stuff. They were lifting it up on a crane and dropping it from a height when it was full onto a steel plate, and dragging it around behind a truck and
trying to break it.
Well, yeah, exactly. Leaving it out in a hot parking lot on a summer day and seeing how much expansion and so the thing's been really rigorously tested. And again, it was largely due to them that we were able to bring this idea to life as a product. So,
and how much gas will it hold? 2 liters?
We have a 1 gallon version and a 2 gallon version this year. We have to sell
that's a big gas bag too.
It is big, yeah. But we have to sell it as an off-road racing product, because it's not an approved fuel container in the sense that you can't just pull up to the gas pump technically and fill it up. It's a very specialized sort of product, but it's been great to see that idea, come to life. Yeah.
Well, and I can certainly see the value of that for Australian motorcycle riders.
Yeah.
But even in the United States, you get some places. in the kind of more extreme environments like Alaska, where there might be several hundred miles between fill-ups, or even if for example, your bike has crappy gas mileage. I've got a sidecar rig that gets 26 miles a gallon, and when no sidecar on the bike that can go 200 plus miles, you put a 300-pound sidecar in at 110 or 15-pound passenger, and all your gear, and all of a sudden you can only go 110 or 20 miles between fill-ups. So having an extra gallon or two of gas at your disposal is a real good way to kind of ease your mind about not making that next gas stop. So that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, thanks.
And plus, it kind of, I think it shows you guys attention to, not just attention to detail, but sensitivity to what motorcycle riders need on road and off road. Because a lot of I don't ride off road at all, so I don't need a tank bag that works well when you stand up on your motorcycle, because I don't stand up on my motorcycle very often. But and the model name of my tank bag is escaping me right now.
The Kiger.
The Kiger, right?
Yeah.
The big one with the clamshell top.
So that's named after there are wild horses in eastern Oregon called the Kiger Mustangs,
Okay.
and the Kiger Gorge on Steens Mountain in southeastern Oregon.
Well, now I have
that's
to visit
the inspiration.
there. Take a picture.
Yeah.
Kiger tank bag, Kiger Gorge.
There you go.
I just really love the design of it. It's clearly thought out from a motorcyclist perspective rather than how other people make things. I've had other tank bags, magnetic and tie down and all that kind of stuff, and even just the attachment method is so simple. 3 straps, tighten them down, tuck the ends, and you're done. And you can use it on any bike. I could throw that thing on any bike.
Yeah.
It's just and it's got a little bit of expandability. It's got a little bit of a map compartment, and even though I've ridden with it through several pretty good rainstorms, and on your website, I read very carefully, you don't claim that it's waterproof.
Well, the outer shell of the tank bags is highly water resistant.
Exactly.
And we include the waterproof inner liner so that if you are in a heavy rain, anything that might be damaged by moisture is well protected inside. Yeah. So,
and I use that inside bag that is waterproof, but I've never had any water get through to the bag. The outside of the bag is never wet. So I've gotten a little bit lazy. I just kind of throw stuff in and get down the road. But I travel with cameras and recording equipment and stuff like that. So having highly water resistant to that point, or even waterproof gear, is really important.
Yeah.
And the concept of soft luggage is something that's building. I don't want to say it's trendy, because there's always been soft luggage.
Sure.
But I think it's getting more attention now as people try to find ways to cut weight but still travel with all the gear that they feel like they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
And plus, it's just nice to be able to reach over and click off your side bag and put a shoulder strap on it and walk up the hill to camp or into a hotel or whatever, stuff like that. I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that have been going on with Giant Loop lately. You guys recently opened up a retail office or retail center or whatever you call it, like an actual store where you can walk in, see merchandise on the rack, and pay your money and walk out with it. What was that experience like?
Well, that process really started a few years ago, because we've gotten to the point that people will make a point of stopping at our shop, like when they're passing through town or that sort of thing, which is always really fun. Like, I love having travelers, stop and when they're on their way through. And originally we didn't really have a place to, accommodate visitors and, retail customers like that. So we'd be dragging them through the warehouse and pulling stuff out of cardboard boxes and stuff like that. And so a couple of years ago, I literally moved out of my office space, and I moved into the bay where we worked on motorcycles. And I've been there for almost 2 years now, while what was my office became our little retail space. We hung grid wall up, and so it became the first time that you could walk in and there was a place that you could see the entire product range in one place, and we could do some test fitting on bikes. And so then in May, we opened this new space, another bay in the warehouse that we're in on the street-facing side became available last fall. So we leased that space and then spent the winter getting it renovated and to make the front half of that, now a proper retail space where people can walk in. They can see not only our whole product line, but also all these other cool parts and camping gear and so on that we've added over the years, and products that we're using ourselves. We decided, instead of sending our customers somewhere else to get those things, we might as well be offering, a complete solution to our customers. So we have a lot of really cool tools and ultralight camping gear as well. You can roll the big garage door up and literally push the bike inside, and we can test fit and that sort of thing. So that's been great. It's kind of the idea is also to make it a little bit of a hub, like our local community. We have a pretty active riding community, and so we're in the process of getting our beer and liquor license so that we can serve package alcohol there. And we have this big counter where you can lay maps out and look at maps and plan a trip. And so it's really going to enable us to do some fun stuff like movie nights during the winter and first aid clinics, or a bunch of different things that we really didn't have the space for before.
Yeah. What's the riding season like in Oregon? I've never been to Oregon. No, actually, I'm sorry, that's a lie. I have been to Oregon, but we got run off the road by an RV and spent 3 days in the hospital and had to have our bike shipped home.
Well, I'm sorry about that, Oregon. Welcome.
We almost made it to Crater Lake. It was an ignominious end to an otherwise epic trip.
Oh, no.
I never got to hang out in Oregon, without back pain for very long.
Dang it.
But so what's I live in Virginia. We have more or less a year-round riding season. What's it like in Oregon as far as riding season goes?
Well, the west side of the Cascade Mountain Range tends to be the rainier, wetter, more moderate climate in Oregon. And so in many parts of Oregon, especially on that side of the mountains, it's pretty easy to ride pretty much year-round, with the occasional snowstorm that might interrupt that for a few days or that sort of thing.
But you don't get 6 feet of snow like people in Idaho and Montana do.
Well, no. On our side of the mountains, the east side of the Cascades Range, the high desert side, most of the snow collects in the mountains themselves, and so we're right where it's transitioning out into the high desert. So 20 minutes from where we live, we have a ski area that got 10 feet of snow actually 12 feet of total snowfall, or something like that this season. So, but the snow does tend to stay up in the higher elevation. So in many years, I make it a point to try and ride at least once every month of the year, right?
Yeah.
So on a day that it's sunny and 35 degrees, we can head out to the desert and ride OHV trails or that sort of thing. So, it's not quite like Virginia, but we can ride most of the year round.
Yeah, we're very low elevation. We're actually having this conversation in Salt Lake City during the MOA National Rally, and I think Salt Lake is 4,000 feet elevation and change.
Yeah.
I was in Denver last weekend for the Super Stakes drawing, and that's 5,000 feet and change.
Yeah.
And my house is 106 feet above sea level.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a big, but we have mountains. We have the Shenandoah National Park and the Appalachian Trail, the hiking trail goes through Virginia, and we have the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Yeah.
So we have what we call mountains, but people in Oregon or Colorado might just look at it and call hills. But it's really nice weather there. So and I don't know anything about, I imagine Utah, you can ride year round.
In places. I mean, I think, Salt Lake City has a pretty serious winter and stuff, but probably some of the more desert places that don't get much precipitation at all.
Yeah, and when I think about Oregon, I don't think of desert.
Yeah.
So when you say high desert, I think of Texas or Arizona or something like that. So it's really interesting. I think that's one of the cool things about riding in the United States is that you can You know, you in some places you can have beach and mountains in the same state,
right?
Which is pretty amazing.
Well, and it's such a vast country. I mean, I've never been to Virginia at all.
Period. Oh, you're missing out, man.
I've been to the capitals of something like 8 different countries, and I've never been to the capital of my own country.
Oh, really?
You know, yeah. So.
Well, DC is a pretty intense place. You know, not just politically speaking. Traffic is. I lived near DC for 32 years, and traffic is just, it can be terrible at times. And then, you know, there's other times where, you know, you hit this window of no traffic, no construction, and you can really have a good time riding on the roads there. But I got to, you know, pump my old hometown sort of, and the Smithsonian Institution, all the different museums. You can, you know, go to Congress and visit your representatives, your government representatives. You can see the White House. They do tours. You know, you can sit on the steps of the Supreme Court or the Lincoln Monument. It's a really amazing place. But, you know, I imagine a lot of the traveling that you do off the motorcycle involves trade shows and things like the MOA Rally, which, you know, they kind of tend to do those things in the same sorts of cities and areas. I know we've talked several times at the AIM Expo, which has been in Orlando, Florida, all the way up till this year when it's going to be in Columbus, Ohio. So, you know, next year they're doing it in Vegas, which will be a lot closer to you.
Yeah.
And so I fully anticipate seeing you at the AIM Expo and being able to chat again. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with us, man. I really appreciate it. And you know, I've been trying to talk to people whose products I use. You know, we've done an interview with Michelin. I use Michelin tires. Had Al Jesse and his business partner Sean Darabin in here. I've got Jesse cases on my bike. I use a Giant Loop tank bag. I had a Coyote. Is that the smaller one? The horseshoe?
Yeah. Coyote saddlebag.
Yeah, and ended up giving that to a friend of mine who was going on a trip and needed it. He was doing the Transamerica Trail on a DZ 250 or something, just a small-ish dirt bike. I was like, how am I going to carry my stuff? Because he's used to riding a GS with the Jesse cases and all that kind of stuff. Actually, I think he has Zegas, the Touratech. Aluminum panniers. But he needed something else, and he loved it so much that he basically just didn't give it back to me. He made me sell it to him. And I haven't had the need to replace it yet, but I used it on my sidecar rig because I didn't want to, I wanted to be able to let my wife or my daughter have the trunk of the sidecar, which is not very large, for their gear, but I still needed to be able to put stuff, to carry my stuff. And the way my rig is set up, you can't get into one of the saddlebags. You can mount it, but you can't open it, so you have to take it off. It's just kind of a hassle. It was a lot easier to just leave the side cases at home, put the Coyote on the back of it, and get down the road. Because, you know, that's one of the great things about the Coyote is if you can accommodate a passenger, you can have luggage.
Yeah, the larger bag, the Great Basin, is incredibly versatile for that reason because it's designed to sit where a passenger sits on the bike, and so it fits basically everything that's designed to carry a passenger, sport bikes and so on. And that's one of the things that we're trying to let people know too is, you know, even though our background is more on the off-road end of the spectrum, you know, as you said about the tank bag, you know, our gear performs great on the road as well, and it's incredibly versatile and almost universal in terms of fit. So
yeah, and it was actually Bloomsburg is the first time I met you, and you talked me into the Coyote. And you might not remember it because, you know, at a big rally like that, there's thousands of people, and you talk to people, and I didn't do as much work with the MOA then as I do now, and hadn't run into you 16 times. But that was a fantastic discovery. At that point, I'd never heard of Giant Loop, so that was a really cool discovery to be able to, you know, easily, because you know, 4 straps, and I had it over my shoulder and could take it in to wherever I was staying. So that was a really great discovery, and I love my Kiger tank bag. It's probably the best tank bag I've ever owned.
Well, thank you.
And I think that, you know, for as high quality as your gear is, the prices are still really reasonable, which makes things a lot, you know. everybody loves to farkle their bikes and to have good gear. Nobody likes to spend more than they need to.
Right.
So you guys are, I think, in that real sweet spot between, cost and value, where you figured out what sells well and what it sells well at. So I hope you guys keep up the good work, and make sure that people visit the website. Can you tell me the URL?
GiantLoopMoto.com.
And you can get information about their I don't even want to call it a retail location. I want to call it a central hub.
We call it the GLADV shop.
There you go, the GLADV shop. And that's in Redmond, you said?
We're in Bend, Oregon.
Bend, Oregon, which is not terribly far from Redmond.
A few minutes down the road.
So hopefully our listeners will be able to visit you someday and say hi. And
yeah, we love it. Come on by, for sure.
Right. Take it easy. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Wes. Appreciate it.
I swear it's a total coincidence. I didn't know that this was going to happen when I scheduled this episode several weeks ago. But if you're listening to this episode on Monday, December 11th of 2017, which is the day that it comes out, then you have hit the first day of Giant Loop's annual holiday sale that runs just from December 11th to the 15th, just Monday through Friday of this week. You can go check out their website at GiantLoopMoto.com. You can stop by the shop in Bend, Oregon that Harold talked about, and you can get nice discounts up to 20% off on a bunch of different stuff, including the Possibles pouch that I mentioned right before the interview there. They're also offering 50% off a bunch of camping gear and tools and a bunch of other stuff. So check out their website. It's just a timely coincidence, I swear, that they've got this sale going on right when this episode comes out. Harold and I did not coordinate that at all. I would have if I had known, but I just got the email last week about the sale this week. So now I'm telling you. Because this podcast is produced by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America, in every episode I will highlight one benefit of being a member. I admit it's an enticement to get you to our website and get you to join for at least 1 year. I've been a member since 1999 and have used the member benefits to my advantage countless times since then, especially the roadside assistance program that I sign up for every year. But that's not what I'm going to tell you about today. Today it's all about Priceline. This is one of the newest benefits that the MOA brings to its membership, and it's a partnership with Priceline that can save MOA members up to 60% on hotel bookings across all of North America. The hotel rates available to MOA members are usually the secret rates offered by Priceline and similar services. However, unlike most of those sites and apps, MOA members will be able to see the names of the hotels along with the discounted rates. Follow the Book Hotels link off the menu bar at bmwmoa.org or visit the membership discounts page. The service is easy to use. You just enter a travel city and the dates you're looking to stay, and the system returns all the available hotels there and the rates. You can book away to your heart's content. Here's a disclaimer though. Prices and availability can vary, and the MOA makes no claim that our price is the lowest or that it can't be beat. Now, the MOA's website is the place to book all your hotel needs and get a competitive price simply for being an MOA member. It's a benefit that could easily pay back the cost of your membership in the MOA. All the links I mentioned in this episode will go out in an email from our mailing list. You can sign up for the mailing list at tinyletter.com/chasingthehorizon. Signing up for the mailing list won 3 people copies of a cool motorcycle film on DVD, and you never know what drawings will happen in the future. I want to thank you for coming back for the 10th episode of Chasing the Horizon, which featured a discussion with Harold Cecil of Giant Loop. Our next episode will feature Randy Richardson of Michelin Tires. That episode will be out on December 27th. Since I won't talk to you before then, Merry Christmas. Andrew Finberg composed and recorded our theme music. Karen Hawker designed our logo. Thanks again to all our guests and listeners for giving us their time. We'll see you out there somewhere on the road, or off it. Ride safe.